We want to dress up the end of the sword here, and we're going to add a pommel. So this, all it is a simple pull that I bought from Home Depot for like $4 or $5. So go to Home Depot or some hardware store and look at the drawer pull section, and you'll find something that you want to do. This one we've kind of filed down a little bit on the edge because it had a little bit of a shoulder. Now that we've filed it down, it's going to sit flush with the narrowest part of our sword end. The only thing we've got to do now is see we've got these two shoulders on the end. We're going to angle those down, smooth the transition so the wrap will come down and it'll make it look a little bit more fluid. It's a good word for it. So let's get started with that. I'm not going to bother measuring this. I'm just going to eyeball it. There's no need getting crazy on this. And I'm going to call that right there centered. So I'm just going to mark this end and this end. And that's where the cut's going to start. And basically we're doing this. That's going to be the cut. I'm going to knock off that shoulder on each side so the handle will come down and then it'll just taper into the pommel. So let's get the line drawn out. I'm going to say something like, I don't know, that looks good. Something like that. And then that's going to end. I'm just eyeballing this too. Because really it's not super duper important. It's just how it looks. Marking that. Yeah, that looks good. So first cut, then we've got our second cut laid out here. I'm cutting like this. So to cut that side, it's going to be awkward over here. So what I've done, I've just transferred my lines so that I can keep cutting on this side, which is moving around like this, messing the cameraman up. So it's back to my initial position to cut. Just easier. Remember, ripping is not the saw's favorite thing to do. Cross-cutting is its favorite. Ripping is not the favorite thing, in my opinion. There's lines and bumps and everything. It's massively ugly. That doesn't matter, doesn't matter, doesn't matter because we're covering it. So don't freak out if yours is even all wavy. Doesn't matter. But we have a basic taper now that we're going to work with. So next up, we're going to drill a hole in this end so we have somewhere to anchor our pommel. When you buy your pull, it's going to come with a little screw. The screw is meant to go through a drawer front, and then on the outside, you screw it into your drawer pull, and then you open your drawer. We're going to use this to anchor it inside our sword. So here's the problem. Because we're not using power tools on this particular project, it presents a little bit of a problem because I was just going to pull the drill out and drill it, which I was reminded is a power tool, which we're not using. So we're going to try something a little different. We've marked our center. I'm going to drive a nail in there, just a little finishing nail, just to get a hole started. And then what I'll do is use, this is a 3/16 twist bit. And I'm going to, by hand, I'm going to just slowly walk this in and get myself deep enough that we can set this screw right here. Now, there's a head on it. We're going to get rid of that in a minute. But for now, all we're concerned about is the shaft of this bolt here. So, and this is going to be a show, I promise you. Let's do that now. All right, so we're going to take this little finishing nail 1.25 or whatever it is. Tap that sucker in just slowly. We want to try to do it lightly because we don't want to split this. We don't want to go too deep. And we're using an 8-ounce ball peen hammer. Not something I would normally use, but somehow my 21-inch hammer itself is probably a little bit more than we need for this task. So we're just going to go with a ball peen. It's just a little cobbler. All right, so here we go. And we want to make sure that it's somewhat, decent. And we'll give that a little bit of a wiggle. And that a little bit more of a wiggle. And we want to have probably a good, I don't know, 1/2 inch of depth. And if your pommel doesn't sit 100% true to the world of this sword, like if it's one way or the other, don't freak out about it. I think that's the motto, don't freak out. Don't freak out about it. So I think that's probably deep enough right there. All right, we're gonna grab another nail. I just had another thought. So we just drove this finishing nail in. It's probably a 1/2 inch in. Now we're going to throw a bigger nail in that same hole and lightly drive it in. Not too far, because if anything's going to split it, it will be this one. If it does split, not the end of the world. One thing that's kind of cool, if you didn't know, with the cut of the nail here, you can see that it's got a kind of a 4-sided cut. You can actually put a nail in and twist it. If you want to, you can chuck it in a power drill, which we're not using this time because we're doing hand tools. But you can actually put it in a power power drill, and it'll actually drill out a rudimentary hole for you. But we're not doing that right now because you don't have one. Put it on your Christmas list. But you probably do have a hammer, and I'm pretty sure you can find a nail. What I'm doing is, as I'm driving it in, obviously there's a hole here. I'm just going until I feel a little bit of friction, like a little bit of resistance, and I give it a couple more shots after that so that I can pull it back out again. Use pliers if you have to. Here's the part we've all been waiting for. Here's a twist bit, 3/16, which will give us enough room for our shaft, which is right here. It'll give us enough room for our shaft. This is how I do it. I just hold it over my drill bit. If I can see drill on both sides, that gives me enough room. So we're just gonna slowly by hand, never done this before either, we're gonna just give this a little bit of love, because you can see with this guy he's still too tight, and we want to have enough room that we can get some epoxy in there too. So let's just see what happens. Probably you should be wearing gloves, but I do this for a living. I've got leather for hands now. So you can see as we're doing this, it actually is biting. So as you go deeper in, you're going to want to take a bit of a bite and then back off and let the sawdust come out. You don't want to have a 1/2 inch of, well, you're never going to do that by hand. Anyways, get that far in without it getting stuck. So just keep going. When you feel like a little bit of tension, back it off. Just keep going like that. Cameraman, Mr. Shane, said, hey, let's try a C-clamp. And I said, hey, that sounds like a great idea. So let's see what happens. We haven't tried this yet, but let's see what happens. I think I already mentioned in one of my videos that C-clamps are excellent ideas to have. I think you might be onto something. I think you're onto something. You can hear wood fibers stretching, pulling. Good thing we're not in a race. Hole is drilled. Took a while. Now we need to get rid of this little Phillips end of our bolt, because that needs to go in the end. All right, so you could do this a couple ways. You know, if you wanted to put this in a vise and use a hacksaw, but that's all, you know, time consuming. So we're just going to use the cutting portion of this right here. And we're just going to just start a couple little bites here. Best thing to use would be like lineman pliers, which I do have a pair of. As I mentioned before, a couple grenades have gone off in here, and I don't know where they're at right now. I think they're buried in a toolbox somewhere. So you can see him. He's going to get decapitated here in a minute. Just give it a couple little chews. Bam! Decapitation complete. Now, there's our total width or total length that we have. So I don't want to wind this thing all the way in. So I'm going to say mark it with my thumb right there very accurately, and we'll just rotate that down. So yeah, that'll be good. This then is going to live in here. Boom, like so. Are you following where we're going with this? Awesome. So the next thing to do is mix up some 5-minute epoxy, shove it in here, and let it sit for 5 minutes and harden up. All right, let's do that next. We are using Lepage or Lepage. I don't know how to say it properly. It is sets in 5 minutes epoxy. It's 2-part epoxy. I'm wearing gloves because this stuff is sticky, and when it gets mixed, it's going to go hard. So the trick with this is, I mean, it looks like it's self-explanatory, like it's a syringe, but you kind of have to watch what's coming out each one. You want to have an equal amount out of each side. And you can see this, one side's kind of cockeyed. I don't know why, probably the last time I used it. But I'll try to make 2 equal lines, and we want to have enough to fill up this hole, actually more than that, just so we know that we've got it. So you can see the right side, there's already a bubble coming out, so I'm moving more to the left to get that flowing. This is always an exercise in patience. All right, see we got stuff coming out? Come on. Come on. There we go. And we're off. You don't want to have too much of either one. Why? Because they both work together. One is a catalyst that sets things off. Oh, now it's flowing. Right on. And I think that's way more than we need. Next up, mixing thoroughly. Now the thing with 5-minute epoxy that you should remember is that it's going to set in 5 minutes. So you don't want to stir this for 4 minutes because it will go off. And when it goes off, oftentimes it goes off with a no warning. It just sort of just gets hard. So what I'm concerned about is I'm scraping right down on the cardboard so that I can pick up all the residue of either the part A or part B and make sure that it's all mixed together nicely. Okay, here comes the messy part. Don't be too concerned about it if it's not working out for you that as well as you would hope. I'm going to bring back Mr. Nail. Hold this guy over the hole and just start moving him in. It's a little bit easier if you put the epoxy in and then you twist and rotate it in because it helps walk it down to the bottom of the hole, and it also helps. You can hear the air bubbles popping. You don't want to have big chunks of air in there because when you do push the bolt in there, you want it to be completely set with epoxy and no pockets of air. So that's fairly full. Let's just scrape this off. Make sure you don't put this somewhere that it's going to stick. And now we'll just take the remaining bit of epoxy and we'll coat this guy. And again, it doesn't matter if it comes up and gets on here. Doesn't matter, doesn't matter, doesn't matter. I just had a bit of a brain flash. Why don't we do this? just so that, you know, your cousin, when he comes over and he always wrecks your stuff, he doesn't get a hold of your sword and then unwinds the end and then throws it in the lake for some reason. So we'll just make this permanent, because that cousin is a pain in the butt. All right, we're ready to rock. I've got epoxy all over my hands. We're approaching, what, 3 minutes maybe? We're now gonna set it, and before we set it, I'm gonna take out, see my fingers? You don't wanna be grabbing onto this. All right, be there?
Yep.
All right, just little ins and outs. You can hear the pops of the bubbles. And it's good. There's a lot of material being forced out, but that means that there's still a lot of material in there. We're just gonna let that sit down like that. Oh yes. And I'm gonna make sure that it's square to the world. So this line lines up with the edge. And since we're here, let's just take a little bit of that off. It's easier to get off while it's wet. Duh. And we're gonna let that sit there for 5 minutes and see if this hardens up. So the 5-minute epoxy is set up 15 minutes later, and we're ready to roll on that. And now we're going to put some hand wrap, some synthetic leather looking material on the handle to give you something better to grab onto.